Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Mark, a trainer here at WEX Field Service Management, and today we are covering QuickBooks Sync Training. This webinar will cover what is QuickBooks Sync. We'll go over the difference between one-way sync items and two-way sync items. We'll go over QuickBooks Online versus QuickBooks Desktop using the QuickBooks Sync tool, and then we'll cover customer, invoice, and payment syncing, back office settings, where to find your sync training, and then some sync tips and best practices. We always host our live Q&A at the end of each of our webinars. That's a great time for you to ask questions and get those answered live on stream. And without further ado, let's move into our first topic, which is what is QuickBooks Sync? If you're here, you have most likely signed up for WEX FSM and you are wanting to connect your QuickBooks to your WEX FSM account. WEX FSM does integrate with QuickBooks. We sync data like your customers, your invoices, and your payments. This will eliminate the need for double entry. So you will enter into WEX FSM, and then those items will sync down to your QuickBooks. Now, there are two versions of QuickBooks. There's QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop. And the one-way sync versus two-way sync, it's important to know the difference between those two. We will be going over all of this today. So, what is the difference between a one-way sync item and a two-way sync item? One-way sync means that you have to enter those items into WEX FSM first, and those will sync down to QuickBooks, but they will not sync up to WEX FSM if you enter into QuickBooks first. This includes your customers, your invoices, and your payments. If you got a sticky note and you need to remind yourself to write that down for now, but after a while, you will know we say this a lot. This is customers, invoices, payments. It rolls off the tongue after you know that. So if you have a brand new customer, maybe in the past you added those customers into your QuickBooks account. Now you will be entering those customers into your WEX FSM account, and that will sync to your QuickBooks. You'll still see those in your QuickBooks, but just know that it does need to start in WEX FSM. So that's for your customers, your invoices, and your payments. One-way sync items. We also have two-way sync items, and those will be like your QuickBooks back office settings, your chart of accounts, your taxes, your QuickBooks item list. And those are a two-way sync, which means that you can edit those in QuickBooks and they will sync up to WEX FSM. We're going to show an example of both in the system so you can get a nice visual of what each of these are. But for now, that is just our foundational knowledge. We have one-way sync items, customers, invoices, payments, and we have two-way sync items like your back office settings, chart of accounts, taxes, and QuickBooks item list. So if you are using QuickBooks Desktop, it does require a sync tool for that sync to happen. The sync tool is what allows WEX FSM and QuickBooks Desktop to communicate, and the sync tool must be installed before you make the switch. Now, QuickBooks is discontinuing the QuickBooks Desktop version. So if you are using QuickBooks Desktop, just know that we will continue to support QuickBooks Desktop on our end. But for the Intuit side, Intuit is the company that creates QuickBooks. They are discontinuing the QuickBooks Desktop version, and most likely if you do have QuickBooks Desktop, eventually you will need to switch to QuickBooks Online. But that is not from the WEX FSM side, that is from the QuickBooks side. So you may need to do some research there if you are QuickBooks Desktop. Now, if you have QuickBooks Desktop and you are using the sync tool, you will need to do an initial sync tool install meeting with our support team. That's very easy to find in the bottom right of your screen, there's a little smiley face guy. You click on that. That is the Help Center. You will go to Tasks, which is where your training is for learning the software. And then you will see a QuickBooks Sync Training. If you're QuickBooks Desktop, you will have the Install Sync Tool module, and you simply click on this link to schedule a meeting. During that meeting, they will ask you for your username and password for the WEX FSM site and your QuickBooks Desktop. If you're using a server, let them know that as well so they can know where to download the file. But this is required, especially if you are in sort of the onboarding process. You'll want to make sure that you get your sync tool installed before you make the switch. Once you have the sync tool installed, you will be able to click on Settings and update your sync status. So you can have it you can have it auto sync every 15, 30, 60 minutes or once per day. Now, for QuickBooks Online, there is no sync tool required. QuickBooks Online is all synced through the cloud. And when you signed up, you would have provided your QuickBooks Online login credentials to our data team. Most likely, you have already started your initial data load, which would then load the majority of your data into your WEX FSM software. And once you have gone through onboarding, you've turned on the sync with QuickBooks Online, that will sync every 10 minutes, 24 hours a day. And so if you enter a customer and maybe a couple invoices, and then you took a payment all within 10 minutes, once that 10-minute mark hits, it will sync all of those adjustments or new items that you have added. Something to keep in mind here, kind of a nuanced detail of the sync is that it will sync every 10 minutes, but there is a cap at 31 items. And actually, this is something new. So let me just double check here. Yes, 31 items. So if you within 10 minutes have added, let's say, 32 customers, then it will sync the first 31 within the 10 minutes, and then that last one would sync within the next 10 minutes. So I'm only saying this because if you notice that there's something that has not synced yet, I would just wait. Wait a little time, let that sync, let the batching sync happen. And if after 24 hours you notice something hasn't synced, then you can always reach out to customer support to see if they can check on that for you. We are going to go over a little bit of how you can troubleshoot your own sync errors. We'll do that in just a bit. But the way that this will work normally is you're going to just add your customers, your invoices, your payments. You're going to make updates. That's going to sync from WEX FSM down to your QuickBooks, and it will happen every 10 minutes. If it goes over the allotted 31 items per 10-minute sync, it will just sync in the next batch the next 10 minutes. So the biggest differences between QuickBooks Desktop and QuickBooks Online is that QuickBooks Desktop does require the sync tool and will allow you to turn auto sync off and just manually sync whenever you want. The QuickBooks Online version, there's no sync tool to worry about. It all will just sync through the cloud automatically every 10 minutes. However, there is no way to turn that auto sync off or to manually sync yourself. It's just going to auto sync. And then for checking sync statuses in your system, we have ways that you can actually check to make sure that the sync is working properly. We are going to jump into WEX FSM to give you a visual of how it looks in your system. And we're going to check one-way sync items, which are your customers, invoices, and payments, and two-way sync items, which are your classes, income accounts, tax groups, payment terms, and QuickBooks item list. So let's go ahead and jump into WEX FSM. All right. So we're talking about Sync, we're talking about QuickBooks Sync, and using WEX FSM. Your day to day, you're most likely going to be adding new customers, or you may talk to a customer and they change their phone number or change their address. You need to do updates to their customer profile. You can see your entire customer list in your WEX FSM system by going to Customers in the main navigation. So, right next to Schedule, it says Customers. Click on that and that will bring you to your customer page. From here, all of your customers in your system will show here as a big list. And from here, you can also see the sync status of those customers. So auto sync statuses, this line here or this column that has these little green bars will tell you whether something is ready to sync, whether it's currently syncing, or that it has synced. And it is, if it says synced here, then you should be able to go into your QuickBooks and see the exact same account. You can also, search customers from here if you need to. If you want to spot check certain sync statuses, you can go and check each status, ready, error, syncing, or synced. And then you may want to merge customers or delete customers. If you want to delete a customer, you just select them and click delete. That will delete them from both WEX FSM and your QuickBooks. If you want to merge accounts together, let's say that you have two accounts that are the same, but the name was slightly different. Maybe somebody added one in the past and then they just added a new one. They didn't know the other one existed. Whatever the scenario is where you would like to merge, there is a very specific order of operations as it relates to the sync to merge your customers. And let's look at that now. So if I want to merge two customer profiles, select the two that you want, click merge. And it tells you right here, not performing this merge in QuickBooks will result in sync errors if the master customer selected in QuickBooks is not the same as the master customer selected in WEX FSM. So all that means is that, and let's break this down, you have two accounts in WEX FSM and you have two accounts in QuickBooks. You'll want to do the merge in QuickBooks first and make sure you select the same master. That way you have one account, one master account in QuickBooks. Then go into WEX FSM, select those two accounts, select the same master, merge those, and now you'll have a one-to-one sync, and the sync won't get confused. It'll know exactly where to go, and that will work as intended. So if you want to merge, just the rule is do the merge first in QuickBooks and make sure that you have the same master selected. That way it's a nice clean one-to-one sync. All right. So that is customer sync. Again, this is a one-way sync item. Now this is after you've made the switch, you're out of onboarding, the sync is turned on. If you add a customer into QuickBooks first, it will not sync up to WEX FSM. Next, let's take a look at invoices. So we will go to Jobs, Invoice List. That will bring you to the invoice list. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a big list of all your invoices in your system. And a scenario here, I would create an invoice for my customer in WEX FSM. I'm going to add line items to that. I will, sell something to my customer. They pay the invoice. Once you create that invoice and you add line items, it is going to show up here in your invoice list, and then that will sync down to your QuickBooks. On the invoice list page, you can check the sync statuses of your invoices. And so here we can see that all of these are ready to sync. On the next sync, they're going to sync over. And if you look at each status, we've got ready, means it has not synced yet, but it's ready to sync and will go on that next sync cycle. Not ready means that there's something missing. There's some piece of information that's missing before it can sync. You can turn individual invoices off if you want something to not sync. An error, that just means there's some type of sync error. Syncing means it's currently syncing. And synced means that it has officially synced and you will be able to see that in your QuickBooks. So let's see an example here of not ready. On this page, you can do your own troubleshooting for items that are not ready to sync. So let's take a look here. We have some not ready statuses. If you have a question, Marta, please, yeah, let me know. Put those in the chat. If it's something that I can just work in, especially if it's something I'm talking about right now, we'll work it in. Otherwise, if I think it'll take a little too long, I'll just say we'll do that during the Q&A. Okay, so question is, what happens if I have a registered client to whom I've already submitted a proposal, but they want the invoice issued in the name of a company? So I think that is something we can work through together in the Q&A. Let's wait on that one because I think I'll need a little more clarity on exactly what you're trying to do. And then yeah, we can do that in the Q&A. All right, perfect. But keep sending me questions. Sometimes if it's something quick I can add in, that's perfect. So if you do have another question, just write that in the chat. But I'll go ahead and put a little emoji on this one. Let's do this. Boink. And then we'll come to that. That'll be the first question we answer in the Q&A. All right. Thank you, Marta. From this page. Now, in theory, you're entering your invoices, you add line items to your invoices, they come here, they sync over, everything's great. Sometimes there's a piece of information that might be missing, and then your system won't know exactly where it needs to sync, and then you will get a not ready status. So if you see not ready on the invoice list page, you just click on details. It'll be in red. You'll see it says not ready. Something is afoot and we need to fix it. So click details and it will tell you what it wants. So this says a tax group is required and it needs income accounts. So down below here, we'll add the income accounts. But if you notice, and this is actually a good teachable moment, the tax group is not available. Like I can't edit this right now. So most likely that is because this is in a closed status. So I'm going to cancel on this. So 15024. Yes. If you notice that you're not able to change something, if your invoices are in a closed or signed status, you can't make edits to it. So in this scenario, I would want to change this to open draft. Then I can go in and update the tax group and make those changes that I need to. Income account, this is asking, what account in your chart of accounts in QuickBooks do you want this to sync to? So I'll go ahead and for these, trim out and final, these I'll just put these into my job income account and click save. I have given it what it wants to sync, and now it will just sync on the next sync cycle. However, look at these. So these have a $0 price point. That means that you created the invoice, but you didn't add any line items. This is pretty common. You get busy, you create it. Maybe you're in the middle of creating an invoice and you realize you get a phone call or you got to jump out for some reason, and you just save the invoice because you're going to come back to it later. If there's no line items on an invoice, it will not sync. So with these, usually you would just go back into that same invoice, add a line item, and then when you save it, it will fix itself. It will just come in, it'll see the line item, and you won't even have to make any changes or updates. It'll just sync on its own. So, three main things to know for the invoice list. Number one is that this is where you can check your auto sync statuses. Number two, this is where you can come in and do your own troubleshooting. So, you just click details, make the edits that it wants, and hit save, and that will work. And number three is that if you don't add any line items, it will not sync. It'll show up as a $0 price point and say not ready until you add line items. Then it will just sync on its own. So that is invoices. And again, this is a one-way sync item. So if you create an invoice in QuickBooks, that's not going to sync up to WEX FSM. Next, let's look at payments. So you will want to go to Jobs, Payment List. Very similar to the invoice list. This is a big list of all of your payments in your system. So whether you're taking a payment without an invoice or you create an invoice, you take payment on that invoice, those will show up here. If it is connected to an invoice, you will see a check here under the invoices column. And if you click the red triangle, it will give you a drop down and you can see what invoice it's connected to. You can even click on the little PDF icon here to view the invoice that this payment was taken on. And you can see payments and credits and the balance, the savings, all right here on the invoice itself. You can also check auto sync statuses just like the other pages. And this is letting you know, is this ready to sync? Has this already synced? Is there a sync error? And it will tell you what is happening when you hover over this little bubble here. So you can search for payments as well. And just know once you take a payment, the payment does need to settle before it will sync over. So if you see that this is in here and the status says, entered, you will want that status to say settled before it will show up in your QuickBooks. And that's just going to happen automatically. Some people's banks take longer to settle, but once the payment is made, you'll see that record in WEX FSM. And once that settles with the bank, that will then sync over to your QuickBooks. And again, one-way sync item for payments. So if you take a payment in QuickBooks, that's not going to sync up to WEX FSM. All right, so those are our one-way sync items. Now let's talk about two-way sync items, which means you can enter those into QuickBooks and it will sync up to WEX FSM and vice versa. These items will sync both ways. If we go to Settings in the top right, Accounting and Taxes, it's the first one in this list. Just click on that. And that will bring you to the Accounting and Taxes page. And everything on this page is a two-way sync item. It will tell you which version of QuickBooks you have at the top. And then when you turn on the sync, and I guess let's be clear about this. If you are still in onboarding, you have just signed up, and you are not completely through onboarding yet, they have not turned on the sync, you haven't made the switch, then you will still continue doing your, do everything you normally do in QuickBooks. Once you make the switch and start using WEX FSM as your main software, then you will start entering into WEX FSM. And everything we're talking about today is really assuming you've made the switch, your sync has been turned on, and you are syncing. So just realize that if you are not through onboarding, you haven't made the switch yet, uh, you will be entering items into QuickBooks still. But once you make that switch, then you'll be entering into WEX FSM first. Okay. Oh, I see some other questions come in. If I receive a payment via wire transfer or ACH directly to my bank account, will that not sync with the invoices in Payzer? Correct. So if someone sends you a payment like directly to your bank, payments are a one-way sync item. You could record. So now, it just gets into how would you get around that. But let's just be very clear. If someone pays you directly, not through WEX FSM, they just pay you or they wire transfer something to your bank account, that's not going to sync up to WEX FSM. If they But I guess the money would already be in your account. So you would need some way of recording that payment. You can simply go into WEX FSM, record a payment, and then turn the payment off for that in WEX FSM. So we can dive a little deeper into that. I can show you that, but just as a direct answer to your question, no, it will not sync to the invoice if the payment is not made through WEX FSM. It would need to be done through WEX FSM if you want it to sync. And then for Brittany, so do I need to reconcile in QuickBooks and that will sync up to WEX? So if you make adjustments, Brittany, to your classes, to your chart of accounts, your income accounts, your liability accounts, inventory part accounts, your tax groups, tax settings, or QuickBooks item list, those you can edit in QuickBooks and they will sync up to WEX FSM. If you're needing to, I guess if you're reconciling, if you make any changes or adjustments to payments, to invoices, uh, your receivables, that will not sync up to WEX FSM. So typically you would be using your reports in WEX FSM. Any adjustments you need to make to invoices, you would do in WEX FSM. However, that information will sync down to your QuickBooks. And if you have like a CPA or an accountant or someone who needs to look at your books, they don't know anything about WEX FSM. All the information will be the same in both systems. And usually you would have them use QuickBooks to take a look at your books. But in terms of any changes that you may need to make to invoices or to payments, you'll want to do that in WEX FSM. And Brittany, we can dive deeper into that in the Q&A if you have further questions on that one. Okay. We'll circle back to those just to make sure that we're good on that. So from this page, we've got settings, accounting and taxes. Everything on this page is a two-way sync. If you need or want to adjust your classes, your income accounts, liability accounts, inventory part accounts, or tax groups, you can do that in both systems and they will sync both ways. Now, I do want to point this out for tax settings. If you are going to collect taxes, you'll want to make sure that this is turned on. And if you have, so this right here, auto lookup tax rate through zip tax, you would have decided whether or not you want this when you signed up. But just some context on what this is. If this is turned off, auto lookup tax rate through zip tax, if that's off, no tax groups will be added, nothing will be modified. What you see here in your tax groups will be a exact one-to-one comparison between your QuickBooks and your WEX FSM account. And then if you make any edits to these tax groups, whether you edit them in your QuickBooks or in WEX FSM, they'll be the same. It will sync both ways. Maybe you have a new QuickBooks account and you don't have a lot of tax groups entered, then that is where zip tax comes in handy. If this is turned on, then it will add tax groups into your system and give you more tax options that will all pull based on zip code. But it will add tax groups. So then those tax groups will sync down to your QuickBooks and you will see new tax groups in your QuickBooks. It'll be in both places. So for some of my customers who are new, they maybe have a brand new QuickBooks account. This is very helpful because this will add tax groups and allow you to get more detailed with the tax rates that you charge your customers. For some of my other customers, they're like, don't you dare touch my taxes. I want them one-to-one exactly what I have in my QuickBooks. And in that case, you will want zip tax turned off. And again, this is something you would have decided when you signed up. But that is the context around tax groups. Okay. Next, let's take a look at another two-way sync item, and that is your QuickBooks item list. Now, a lot of customers, let's go here. So some of my customers, they will use their QuickBooks item list for pricing. So maybe your price book, the way that you and your technicians know what the prices of things are, is done through your QuickBooks item list. You can use your item list on invoices, and it's very simple. Once you create an invoice, I'm on an invoice right now, you will click Add Item. And then you will see right here from your QuickBooks item list. This is a one-to-one comparison of your QuickBooks item list, and any edits or updates that you need to make to your QuickBooks item list, I would recommend making those in QuickBooks because then that will sync up to WEX FSM. So let's say I needed to change the price of this fan motor. I would just go into QuickBooks, type in fan motor, update the price. That will sync within, let's say 10-minute interval if you're QuickBooks Online, and those updates will show in WEX FSM from updating them in QuickBooks first. All right, and then let's look also at payment terms, which is another two-way sync item. To get to payment terms, you will go to Settings in the top right, Jobs, Payment Terms. From here, payment terms are really just the terms and agreements you have for how long someone has to pay their bill. By default, maybe due on receipt is what you want. You can set a default for payment terms here. Maybe for your commercial customers, you're doing a net 30. But as it relates to your sync and syncing to QuickBooks, this is a two-way sync item. So if you update or add payment terms in WEX FSM, those will sync down to QuickBooks or vice versa. You can create and edit payment terms in QuickBooks, and those will sync up to WEX FSM. All right. Now down in the bottom right, we have this little smiley face guy, and we call this the Help Center. Click on the Help Center. If you have any questions at all, or there's something that isn't working how you want it, you can always contact support and just let them know. This is your main way to get assistance from the support team right here, contact support. If you're interested in more QuickBooks training, you can go to Help and just type in QuickBooks. All of our learning articles for QuickBooks will show up right here. Also, if you go to Tasks, which is the last icon here at the bottom, you will have a QuickBooks Sync training, and that's just videos, information that will walk you through details. Many of the things that we talked about today are within this module. And then if you want to watch a replay of this, so we are recording today's session, you will be able to go to Home, Video Courses and Webinars, and then scroll down to Past Webinars. And our most up-to-date version of each of these sessions will be posted here. So right now, QuickBooks Sync Training, this is where you'll watch that recording. All right, so that is all the information that we have for today's presentation. We're going to jump into our Q&A now, but I just want to say thank you guys so much for joining. My name is Mark with WEX Field Service Management, and this has been QuickBooks Sync Training.